Okay. I think my dog's getting bored of me. I just really wanted to jump on really, really quickly to talk to you about my 5 trickiest, stickiest substances. Okay. And the reason I thought this might be helpful is because I have a few sort of friends and clients, and or slash, I've never have been very good with boundaries my whole career. I'm sure you can imagine. But there are a few people, as I'm putting this program now out there, and it's in a little bit more of a concise, with some explanation and some way of doing the program alone. I know several people who are sort of embarking on the journey, and one of my clients is a bit nervous, even though he has done considerable amount of detox and has lived very close to the land and enjoyed a sort of a natural kind of just a natural lifestyle. I know lots of people who have, but is feeling anxious about it now. And he is very much one of those people, and I said this to him the other day, and I think there can be people like this who are people who can just kind of eat anything and just sort of get away with it. Now, there are the people who are naturally like that, and then there are the people who are like that because they've just been in a state of accumulation for many, many years and decades and have never done a detox. So because you haven't really, lived a detox lifestyle, you don't yet know really how those substances are affecting you and things like that. So I think it's fair just for yourself to do that experiment and to discover. And recently, because we do call it the work, we call, the awakening, we have done for many, many years, say, oh God, I got to do the work, And a teacher of mine many years ago did say, and I kind of took it on board back then, that we shouldn't call it work because it makes people not want to do it. It's self-love, it's self-care. And I took that on board for a bit, and someone recently, after I called it the work, went into that sort of side of things. And you know what? I'm going to stand by what I said and add to that and it was the same for this teacher, he wasn't really doing the work because the work is discipline. And it's about having discipline. That's what mastery is. That's what self-mastery is. It's about having discipline over your desires, okay, and your ego wants. And part of those ego wants are actual physiological addictions. So we need to get over the addictions so that we're not being led by and driven by behaviors that are driven by putting substances into our bodies, because they do affect the mechanisms of the body, like the blood sugar levels and the metabolism, and they create a sort of type of ADHD in the body, and that is what can very much burn people out, kind of almost instantly. You aren't expecting it to happen. It actually very much is work, and in the Bible it actually does say that you can take the wide open road if you want to, and that's free will. However, the spiritual path is a very small, tight, windy road, and it can be quite difficult to navigate, and it can be quite difficult to get through, and that is shadow work, and it is work sometimes, okay? And for me, it's work all the time, and I would very much suggest that you see your actual process as your work and your work as your distraction, okay? Because that's very much what it is. And it's just a way of us actually paying to be alive, to do the work. Nobody told us we were actually going to have to fund it as well. You know, we all thought we were getting a grant on this, and you know, that still may happen. But anyway, I digress. So there really are, I think, about 5 or 6, 7. I mean, there are a few, and I'm going to go through them. The tricky, sticky stuff, and it can make you feel tricky and sticky, and it can make you think tricky, sticky, and behave in tricky, sticky ways. Okay. The thing is that we don't actually quite often even think about what we've put into our bodies when we start to consider our behavior and the way that we feel. Okay, but when we start to do that, we can actually empower ourselves and say, hey, let me just experiment. When I take that out, it's not even saying you must get rid of this. You know, yeah, some people do live to 103, smoking, drinking, and that's fine, and that's, you know, and I very much do say that if you're living that path, you know, and you take pharmaceuticals and things like that, particularly as you age and you get to a certain age, you actually might be better off sticking with that lifestyle, because in some ways you could live a bit longer. You know, you could actually live a bit longer than if you start to detox, and I have heard it happen, you know. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it means that you start to detox. That process just shuts down the systems of the body, because they don't really necessarily understand the nature of detox and the fact that you really do have to get the toxins out of the body. It isn't enough just to juice cleanse. So I'm never suggesting that to anyone. But you don't necessarily have to always be fasting. That is a process that comes very much over a period of time, and that, like I said, there are the people who can get away with the things that they can get away with and the things that they want to get away with, and that is very much your choice. But it isn't a choice if you don't give yourself the opportunity to see what both are like. And even if you have in the past, your situation may have changed, and it may be very much more beneficial to you if you're in a greater weakened state, which we often happens to do anyway as we age. But if you are on medication, you know, please do either reach out to me, you know, with a question or something like that, or to your doctor, you know, because I am available for, obviously, you know, the odd question, but as well a few sort of consultations, and you know, we can use some kinesiology and things like that. But so the 5 substances I want to talk about: tobacco, it's the biggie. Okay, I'm sorry, I know the people who use it will, you know, try every trick in the book. It's only 1 a day, and maybe it is only 1 a day, but and that is still a lot of sticky, tricky, dark tar that is going into your lungs. And if you just take one drag and you blow it out onto your hand, you will find, and it's very much here as well, because you'll go, and you'll go, oh, it's disgusting, but that there is about 3 or 4 millimeters either side, so that is coming up to a centimeter long, of a brown strip of on just on either side of your mouth of tar. And so that is going to be embedding itself all over, you know, the alveoli, obviously, of the lungs, but also, and in my work, it's very, very much about switching on and the electrical impulses of the body that just, you know, just make you feel alive, you know, and feel things very, very much in a, you know, an sort of alive way, an enlivening way, an enlightening way, you know, and making you feel in an enlightened state, you know. And so it can very much sort of have this kind of plastering effect, but that is suffocating from the inside, very much the nerve endings and the cell. And as we know, there is a nerve ending feeding every cell in the body. So very much tobacco. See if you can, use something like hypnosis, your first process. Perfect for something that you're trying to release and let go. It's no longer serving you. There are plenty of hypnotherapies out there for addictions, tobacco, smoking, you name it, they're out there. So either get one from free off YouTube, download one and pay for it, or even have some sessions, with a practitioner. So number 2 then is very much alcohol. And I've said it recently, I'm going to say it again. It is the number 1 substance that if you ever want to be immortal, you will have to have stopped drinking alcohol for some time, I believe. Okay, I am very lucky and I haven't drank alcohol for 21 years. Okay, and I say I'm very lucky because it is so incredibly addictive, and I knew at one stage I was getting addicted to it, and it creeps up on you very young. And I feel blessed to have, I feel, inspired some young people to experience that in themselves and realize that they also didn't want to be led by something like that, and so have made better choices in their lives. So I'm very pleased to hear about that. And it is very much like a sugar, and sugar is going to be the next substance that I talk about. And it's interesting how these substances are very, very much just part of our daily life and our daily existence. And so it's difficult to imagine the change that actually you experience when you allow yourself to really move beyond this sort of diseased state. And I am going to say that because very much people feel sick and tired in our culture. They very much feel, stressed out. We call it stressed, and it's very reactive. And as a result, people don't often realize or recognize that it is them, or that they're even being in that way. It could be road rage. It could just be, giving a piece of equipment a kick. It could just be a very passive aggressive put down. There are all sorts of ways that we do a sideways move, what we call it on the hero's journey, to avoid looking at ourselves. And that is an outward projection, and you're very much going to be encouraged through this journey to very, very much always write from the eye anything that you think or that you feel. So alcohol is number 2, and it is a sugar, and it's usually made from a fruit or a grain, which is a carb, again, a sugar, and very occasionally a kind of starchy vegetable, which again, you could class as a carb. Okay, and so it's very, very much sugar-based. And the thing about sugar, the nature of sugar, I considered this, is that actually when you heat it, it turns into a syrup. And then when it cools, it actually can harden, into a very, very hard substance. So, we're putting these substances into our bodies, and we don't put it necessarily into the body as a syrup, but it could be in those cookies as a sugar syrup insert, and exactly know how and why they process some of these sugars. But but my point being is that, it does harden the arteries. It's the sugars that is doing it. And when we put things that are that acidic, because sugar is a very, very acidic food, and so it creates heat and inflammation in the body. So does alcohol, and we know it because always with the first sip of alcohol, there's this warm and kind of soothing effect that we get from it, and that's the heat. And it's a very, very much an inflammatory food. Okay, I would say it's probably the number one because it's such a concentrate of sugars. And so I'm doing sugar and alcohol together. We also have the fact that when we put very acidic and very toxic foods into our bodies will lay down again a further plaque. So not only are they already hardening the actual tissue and thickening the blood and the fluids in the body, as we know, because sugar turns to a syrup, we are also laying down then a plaque on top of that, of the amalgamation of all of these and cholesterol. Then we come to carbs, and that's very much your bread products, okay? Very much, again, on the same level as sugars. Laying down that plaque and eating a food, what we really want to be looking at. So the foods that are okay are the foods that you find in nature. That's just simple fruits that would be, in your neighbourhood, okay, and in season. Vegetables, preferably homegrown, but grown locally if possible. And good source of local meat and or fish, okay? And then if you really need it, because you're the kind of person who can really just eat anything, you might choose to have some kind of ideally raw dairy or goats produce. Ideally goats. Goats is a much more sort of palatable food than dairy. Dairy isn't really meant for humans. Again, it lays down a plaque. It has a very kind of filmy effect inside the body, but then it also adds a mucus. Okay, it's a mucus forming food. It's the other way that we lay down a plaque and that we gather up toxins so that then when we have a trigger of a cold or a flu, we blow out all of those toxins. They're not required. They're surplus to the requirements. They've been gathered for some time and now we're releasing it, and that's a really positive thing, okay? And then on top of that, the very last thing that I'll say for today, and I believe that's probably 5 or 6, is any kind of chemicals, any white powders or pills, or any colour these days, okay? Sometimes they're blue, the capsules or whatever. And for the exact same reason, these are heat in the body, little rips and tears, laying down of plaque like a band-aid to stop all of the fluids leaching, all of the proteins leaching out from, where they're contained, and creating a toxicity inside the body. Because not only is it toxic with chemicals, but it will then also be toxic even with natural, processes of that, what we call endosomes. Okay, so exosomes, synthetic chemicals, endosomes, naturally produced chemicals, but those can be things like parasites, and there may be an overgrowth. Yeasts, another parasite. They're very, very often an overgrowth of yeast if you eat a lot of wheat, particularly in the stomach. And then what does sugar do to yeast? Okay, so then we have candida quite often. And quite often, again, these are suppressed in the body, and it isn't, and that's part of the issue with detoxing and things like that, is that it very much isn't as a result of detox, but unfortunately, we can start to release these parts that have been stored away, and then we're dealing with an overgrowth of yeast. It isn't because of the detox, it's because you have created a softening and an opportunity for that to start to move towards a process of elimination, okay? And then you're very, very much going to be wanting to eliminate the sugars, the yeasts, so that is bread, okay? As well as very sweet fruits, you're going to want to eliminate those. I couldn't eat bananas for years, I still don't eat them. I did eat a few, and actually I had to gain some fat last year because I was just burning way too much fat. And I started to eat a bit of fruit, and that was what helped me to gain fat very quickly. So if you are on some kind of, food journey and trying to lose weight and you're not losing weight and you're wondering why, have a look at the fruit. Well, have a look at the sugars. That's carbs and fruit, but also sugar. Eliminate it altogether. And also dairy can help you to lose weight very, very quickly if that's what you're wanting. And then you can start to reintroduce it, and then you can find your tipping point, okay? And that's when you know you've had enough, and then maybe you've had a little bit more, and then you go, oh, that was enough. I thought it was enough. I shouldn't have had that extra bit. And then you know, and your body knows as well. And so that's the beauty of detox, is that it comes back to a remembering of what it feels like to be satiated, okay, and not to just be in the pull of the addiction for the hit, okay. So I'll leave it there. I think that's quite a lot of information. I'm going to go through it and condense it down, okay.